So on this earth, there are people who have no belief in any religion. Not only this, but there are people who criticize the religious traditions. And then there are those who have no interest in religion. And then those who take interest in or pay attention to the religions. But all of them are the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. But most people consider their physical pleasure to be more important. So the religious traditions don't only focus on the physical pleasure, but mental satisfaction through faith, love, and compassion, which all have to do with your mind, the sixth mind. When people undergo difficult situations in life and become helpless and hopeless almost, then they keep faith in the religious traditions, which keeps them hope. So all religions teach the practice of believing or faith. So as far as I can see, the objective or the goal of all these religious traditions is that of the practice of love and compassion, whether we are theistic, following theistic religious traditions or non-theistic ones. So the theistic religious traditions, it's very clear that they teach the message is love and compassion. So between those who are believers and non-believers, those who are believers have something that they can actually, which keeps them going on, even at such difficult situations. So, of course, philosophically, there are big differences between the religious traditions. So Buddhism, right from the beginning, the Buddha has said, do not commit any evil, cultivate the wealth of virtue, and thoroughly tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So this is how the Buddha tells us to subdue or transform our mind. And the way it is done is by using our intelligence, doing critical analysis into the nature of things, and not merely based on faith. And so you should understand the shortcomings of the unruly mind. If you let yourself be overtaken by it, what is the problem? You should know that. And if your mind is undisciplined, then you will have unhappiness at the immediate level as well as in the long run. And so you need to see the shortcomings of these, the unruly mind, undisciplined mind. And when your mind is disciplined and controlled, these problems that arise through undisciplined mind will be reduced. And therefore, the Buddha emphasizes the importance of the means of disciplining or controlling your mind. And so, in order for that, it's not only that we should pray, but we need to understand the workings or the system of the mind itself and understand what are those factors which give us unhappiness, what causes the undisciplined mind. And this is, according to the Indian traditions, called mental afflictions, kleshas. And so these mental afflictions or kleshas are those which disturb our mind the moment they arise in us. So before the Buddha came, this kind of teaching was already there in India. And then to tackle these emotions, these destructive emotions, mental afflictions, and undisciplined mind, there are the practices of single-pointed concentration and the critical investigative analysis into the things. Which, when you develop this intelligence or the wisdom, realizing the nature of the mind, critically checking the nature of things, and that is that of the vipassana. So you need to see the pros and cons of the disciplined and undisciplined minds. You need to really think through these. In Ratnavali, the precious garland, Master Nagarjuna says, so when your mind, our goal are twofold: the temporarily, that of the higher rebirth, and then the ultimately we seek that of definite goodness. So definite goodness, which is certainly good, it refers to liberation. A state where you have completely eliminated all mental afflictions. And so therefore, these afflictions will never return in your mind stream, and therefore it is called certainly good or definite goodness. And this has to come through that of applying the antidote to the mental afflictions, the kleshas. So this state where you have no more any of the mental afflictions is called nirvana or liberation. That is our ultimate goal, and it is the lasting happiness. Now, in order to reach that goal, we need to train our mind in analytical, critical analysis into the things, nature of things. So as human beings, we all have this marvelous intelligence, isn't it? So there are also other beings like the non-humans and so forth, who may also have some intelligence, but not as good as the intelligence of human beings. So on the basis of this, using this intelligence, we practice the three trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom. And mainly it is this wisdom. So Master Nagarjuna's Ratnavali mentions the temporary goal of higher rebirth and the ultimate goal of nirvana, the definite goodness. So in order to attain that ultimate goal, we need to create the causes for higher rebirth first. And so we need to create the causes of such a rebirth where we can actually continue with the practice of the dharma. So what that means is that you have to have a calm, composed mind. Because if you have disturbed mind, then there's problem in using your intelligence properly. So if you teach someone who is disturbed mentally, and tell them that you should think about selflessness or that of altruism and so forth, they may not like it. So first they need to calm their mind, and therefore we need to first seek a peace of mind. And so for that, it's not necessary that you need to follow or base yourself on some religion as such, but without touching any religion. For example, like what the scientists do through their research and so forth. And then, of course, in certain religious matters that are explained in the religious traditions are mysterious to us yet. And some of them are like a hidden phenomena for us. And so we can't explain to people easily. So we need to actually teach people how to gain a calm, undisturbed mind by using scientific findings. not only talking about religion. So with regard to science, until towards the later part of the end of the 20th century, these neuroscientists, the brain scientists, paid attention to what mind or consciousness is. And so now we are in the beginning of the 21st century. So there are more and more number of scientists taking interest in the workings of our mind or consciousness. So I think that this will continue to be so, that there will be increasing number of scientists taking interest in understanding the mind. So we are talking about a method which can be applied by both the believers as well as non-believers, so that at the individual level, people are peaceful, and then that the message could be expanded further to the communities. And so we are talking about universal value here. It's very important to talk about the means through the means of gaining peace of mind through universal values. So on the basis of that, then in the Indian traditions, when they talk about past and future lives, they talk about the causes giving rise, the good causes or positive ones giving rise to good results. And not only through prayers, but you create the cause for good birth in the next life. So, but regarding those of the theistic religious traditions, and the followers could only pray to their God for a good life. And so, as for us, we for the Buddhists, there are the practices leading to higher rebirth. First of all, the first stage of attaining the higher rebirth. So if you live a positive life, good life in this life, then you will have a higher, create the causes for a higher rebirth. So when you work for the higher rebirth in the next life, then of course the good things in this life also follows as a byproduct. And then you attain that of nirvana, and the ultimate nirvana is that of non-abiding nirvana. There is Buddhahood. And so Master Aryadeva says, first we need to get rid of non-meritorious actions. So when you do that, then in this life you will be happy, and then you are also creating the merits for the higher rebirth in the next life. And then in the middle, he says this grasping at the self must be gotten rid of. And so this grasping at the self is the obstacle to that of nirvana or liberation. And so he says you need to get rid of it. And then in the end, in order to attain that of the ultimate definite goodness, which is the omniscient state of Buddhahood, you need to, of course, have developed that of the wisdom of emptiness, which of course acts as antidote to mental afflictions. But not only that, we should also aim to get rid of the obscuration to knowledge with that wisdom. So for that, of course, with regards to how to the identification of these obscuration to knowledge, there are different views according to the philosophical schools, but the Prasangika Madhyamakas say that these obscuration to knowledge are like the imprints left by, residual imprints left by those of the mental afflictions. And therefore, in order to get rid of the obscuration to knowledge, you first need to get rid of these mental afflictions themselves. And so you need to develop wisdom, which is supported by the bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, altruistic spirit of enlightenment, as well as the 6 perfections. So this is what is meant by, in the end, or finally, get rid of this all views. And so when you are able to follow through this instruction, the threefold instruction, then it is said that you are a wise one, Master Aryadeva says. So with regard to the first line in this 400 verses quote, the non-meritorious ones refer to the 10 non-virtuous actions, such as taking life of others and taking what is not given, and so forth. So with regard to the 10th non-meritorious action, which is that of wrong view, of course, it can be interpreted according to the different religious traditions. For example, the theistic religious traditions would have their own interpretation of not believing in a creator God would be considered as a wrong view. But the rest of these non-virtuous actions are shared principles or beliefs in all the religious traditions. So in Buddhism, we have the 3 objects of refuge, which are those of the Buddha as the teacher, Dharma as the actual refuge, and the Sangha as the assistance on the path. So, as I explained yesterday also, the true cessation is, the final true cessation is that of the elimination of all mental afflictions through the application of an antidote to them. And so, practicing the selflessness, which comes within the practice of the wisdom of the 3 trainings. That of training of morality and concentration and wisdom, it is the wisdom. And then, with regard to the wisdom, of course, there are wisdom which understands those are the conventionalities of things or conventional things or subjects, and then wisdom realizing the ultimate truth or reality of things. So, of course, wisdom realizing selflessness is that antidote to the mental afflictions, but as a support to that, you need to develop single-pointed concentration as well. And so, in order to develop this single-pointed concentration or calm abiding, you need to be mindful and introspective so that you are not wavered from your object of the focus of your meditation. And so, with mindfulness, you actually hold your mind to the object without forgetting it, and then together with it, while focusing on it, and the object with mindfulness, you also, from one side of your mind, check whether you are actually losing your mindfulness or not, which is introspection. And so these 2 help in developing the single-pointed concentration. And so, in order to, for that, you need to develop that of the morality. And so, within the practice of morality, you need to check where your actions of your body and speech, whether you are being virtuous or not. And with mindfulness, whether you are going against the vows and precepts or not, and whether you are committing some wrongdoing or not, you should be able to show mindfulness to see that. And as soon as you see yourself tending towards some negative actions, then you should actually use introspection to see and be vigilant about what you are doing and try to reverse yourself from the wrongdoings. And so, in order to attain the definite goodness, Master Chayadeva says in the middle, get rid of the self-grasping. And so there's no other means to get rid of this self-grasping than the meditation or the insight into selflessness. Because it is said in Pramanavartika that love or affection does not go diametrically opposite to that of the self-grasping attitude or the self-grasping mind. And therefore, to this self-grasping, you need to see that it is wrong with regards to what it's actually grasped or clings on to. And you should be able to see that, that there is no such a self which is grasped by the self-grasping mind. And with that mind, which realizes selflessness, although both the self-grasping and this wisdom of selflessness are observing the same object, but one sees that object as if it has some independent self, and the other actually sees that that is not the reality. And so in this way, the wisdom realizing selflessness counters the self-grasping. And so in this way, you need to attain that of the nirvana, liberation, by overcoming this root of the afflictive emotions, which is self-grasping. And so that's how, in the middle, you should get rid of the selflessness to reach that of the definite goodness. And Joji, in his text on the lamp for the path to enlightenment, gives the practices pertaining to the three types of beings. There's beings of small scope or faculty and intermediate faculty, and then great faculty. So this is also related to these what the 400 verses says. And with regards to the Ratnavali, there are 16 factors for attaining higher rebirth, practicing the 10 virtuous actions, and then avoiding the alcohol, and then avoiding wrong livelihood, and then avoiding harming others. And greater harms are such as those of killing sentient beings and so forth. But here, which comes under the 10 non-virtuous actions. Now here, what it refers to is deceiving others, abusing others, and so forth. And so, not taking alcohol, not indulging in wrong livelihood, and not hurting or harming others. And then venerating or honoring those worthy of honor, such as your parents and so forth, as well as elderly people who need help, and then nurses. So taking care of such poor and needy people, as well as serving sick people as nurses, would come under this, and then giving respectfully. So usually when we give something to somebody, you feel, oh, I am the benefactor, and this person is the beneficent, and therefore beneficiary. Therefore, you feel as if this kind of is self-importance. So this must not happen, whereas you should respectfully give what you are giving to. As the 8 verses of the mind training says, whenever I associate with anyone, may I look upon myself as the lowest and look upon others as the highest, and hold them dear. And so you need to offer or practice these 16 factors for higher rebirth, as mentioned in this the Ratnavali, precious garland. So when you train yourself on these practices, the path leading to higher rebirth, you will be happy in this life as well. You will be, you will have more friends. Others will be friends of you. And so you will make this higher rebirth, like this human rebirth, meaningful and fruitful, as well as attain a meaningful and fruitful higher rebirth in the next life. And so this is about getting rid of those of the non-meritorious actions. And with regard to the non-Buddhist traditions, they assert that there is a self-sufficiently, substantially existent I, or a person, a self, and on top of that, they reinforce this belief by asserting that there is a self which is permanent, single, and autonomous, which goes from life to life. And so, in this way, they go about with their practices. And so these kind of the philosophically asserted self is there in the non-Buddhist traditions. So of course we also instinctively have this grasping at some kind of autonomous self. Even the insects and ants and so forth have that. They have a sense or notion of an I, which is like the governor of the psychophysical aggregates. And so when you say whose body or it is, I mean, you'll say, my body. So as if I am the governor or the ruler of this body and the psychophysical aggregates. So you have this notion of a self, which is like a king or a sovereign over the mind and the body combination. And so there is this sense of a solid I. And therefore, first you have this clinging to I, thinking I, and cling to the self. And then you cling to the possessions or mine, thinking mine. And therefore, you think that my body, my relatives, my possessions, and my relatives, and so forth. And then there is this growth of attachment. And as soon as there is some, even a slight kind of provocation to obstruct, to cause some kind of an obstacle to what you want, then you become angry. And so, in the teaching of the Buddha, it is said that you need to get rid of this self-grasping by applying the antidote to reach nirvana. So when you really give thought to, closely give thought to this the selflessness view, and you'll be able to see that it is possible to get rid of this the self-grasping, and therefore you wish to pursue that of liberation. So in the three principal aspects of the path, Jerem Rinpoche says, swept by the four powerful currents of the river, and you are enclosed and meshed in this cage of and you are bound by this difficult to undo knot of the karma, and that you are enmeshed in this self-grasping. And you are enshrouded in darkness, enshrouded by darkness of ignorance. And so that of the enmeshing enmeshed by that of the self-grasping shows that of self-grasping of a person, and then being enshrouded by darkness of ignorance shows that of selfless of phenomena. And in the text itself, it says, and therefore, thinking that all my mother sentient beings are in this same situation, and you develop that of the bodhicitta. So instead, you can switch these two lines. Instead of saying, seeing this situation of my mother sentient beings, you say, seeing this situation of myself. Then you get rid of or this self-grasping or. And so this is and so thinking that this is your situation, you try to develop that of renunciation. So these two lines could be switched to relate to that of the development of renunciation or the determination to be free from samsara. So when you are able to understand this well, how the process of attaining the liberation through the understanding of emptiness or selflessness, then you will be able to see that, this is possible. And even that of the omniscient state of Buddhahood also is possible. And therefore, this also connects with what we have mentioned before in the last day, that the bodhisattvas observe or focus their mind on enlightenment with wisdom, and focus their mind on sentient beings with compassion. And so with regard to the development of the bodhicitta, there are two systems or traditions, which are those of the sevenfold cause and effect instruction and the equaling and exchanging self and others. So for those of the sharp faculty, it is more effective for them to follow this second system. And with regard to this, the development of bodhicitta, and there is no other greater text than the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, and which is also based on Master Nagarjuna's instructions found in Ratnavali and other texts. And if you are interested in studying Bodhisattva Charya Avatara by Shantideva, you need to study the 6th chapter, which talks about, which teaches that of patience or tolerance. And when you are able to study this well, you'll see how the practice of patience can be powerfully developed. And it says even that enemy is your best teacher for practicing patience. So without an enemy or an adversary, you will not have the opportunity to practice patience as such. So otherwise, your practice of patience may not be that powerful and effective. Kunu Lama Rinpoche used to tell me this story that where somebody was going on a circumambulation on the Kora path in Lhasa, and somebody, when he was going on the Kora, there was somebody sitting beside the road, and this first person said, "What are you doing?" And this second person who was sitting there said, "I'm practicing patience." And then the first person said, and then in that case, eat shit. And then immediately the person supposed to be meditating or patience immediately retorted, "You eat shit." So that's not real practice of patience, is it? And so you cannot practice patience on the basis or in relation to the Buddhas and your teachers and so forth, but you can practice it in relation to one's own adversary, someone provoking you anger. And therefore, Shantideva says the adversaries or enemies are your spiritual teacher for practicing patience. And then the 8th chapter teaches that of equaling and exchanging self and others. So the reasonings that are used in the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara are so powerful that both the grasping at the self as well as that of the self-cherishing attitude become dumbfounded. And then with regard to the wisdom, there is the 9th chapter. And so study the 8th chapter for bodhicitta. Even if you are a non-believer, if you read these chapters, the 6th and 8th, you will be able to find it helpful to reduce your anger. You don't need to talk about past and future lives or nirvana and omniscience and so forth. Even in this life, on a daily basis, you'll find these teachings helpful. If you study these 2 chapters, so followers of Christianity, Judaism, Islam could also read these 2 chapters from the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. So there are few elements which may be unique Buddhist practice as such, but on the whole, we can say that these practices of altruism and the practice of patience or tolerance are something that is shared amongst the religious traditions. So when if you are a short-tempered person, you should study the 6th chapter. And when you are selfish, really, obsessed with selfish attitude, then you should study that of the 8th chapter, which is on altruism. So even if you may be a follower of theistic religions, these 2 chapters, 6th and 8th, of the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life could be beneficial. And of course, for the Buddhists, they would definitely be beneficial. And then the 9th chapter is about wisdom. His Holiness was asking earlier about whether there is a translation of the Bodhisattva Charya Avatar in Russian, and yes, it is. So for the 9th chapter, to really understand it well, it would be difficult for you to understand it without having studied Mula Madhyamaka Karika and the 400 verses, and also the Madhyamaka Avatara. So the most important chapters, I would say, for our practice are the 6th and the 8th chapter. And so these will help you to gain understanding of what is meant by the 3rd line in the 400 verses, which says, in the end, or finally get rid of the views, distorted views. So this is to give you an introductory talk. You need to train yourself in a gradual manner, beginning with from the bottom up. These experiences will not happen right away. You need to put effort and work hard in your practice, and so that after decades of practice, then you will see some transformation within yourself. These transformations will not happen immediately like that. Now, so let's go through the Vajrakara Sutra. So we stopped at 108. Just before the last 2 lines, it says, since not abiding in anything whatever, he abides without affliction, he abides. The Bhagwan said, Subhuti, what do you think about this? Just that Dharma, there was, see from the Tathagata Arhat, the perfectly complete Buddha Dipankara exists whatsoever? Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, it is not so. So this is talking about the objects to be negated when we establish emptiness. So although things, when we look at them, they do appear to have some kind of a solid, concrete existence. That dharma that was received by the Tathagata from the Tathagata Arhat perfectly complete Buddha, Dhammankara does not exist whatsoever. The Bhagwan said, Subhuti, if some Bodhisattva were to say, I shall actualize arranged fields, they would speak untruly. Why is that, Subhuti? Because arranged fields called arranged fields. Those arranged fields are taught by the Tathagata as non-existent. Therefore, they are called arranged fields. Subhuti, therefore, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas thus should generate a mind without abiding. So although the mind perceives and conceives as there is some kind of a solid existence and things, that should not happen. So it should not generate the mind not abiding in anything. And should generate the mind not abiding in anything. They should generate the mind not abiding in form. They should generate the mind not abiding in sound, smell, taste, tactility, and phenomenon. Subhuti, it is like this. If, for example, the body of a being were to become like this, as big as Sumeru, the king of mountains, Subhuti, what do you think about this? Would that body be big? Subhuti replied to Bhagwan, that body would be big. Sugata, that body would be big. Why is that? Because it is taught by the Tathagata as not being a thing. Therefore, it is called a body. Since it is taught by the Tathagata as not being a thing. So, of course, we may talk about Mount Meru being big, of course, but Mount Meru does not exist on this earth, at least, because if it does exist, it should be perceivable to us, because it is said that we enjoy that of the shadow of Mount Meru. So when the sun passes beyond Mount Meru, it is said that the enriches that of the northern continent. It is said that the southern continent, which is this Jambudvipa, this earth, experiences darkness. So in that sense, it should be perceptible. So when we actually refute non-Buddhist theses, we use this kind of reasoning that if it does exist, it should be perceptible. While we use such a logic against the non-Buddhist, why can't we use it to our own belief that there's Mount Meru, as it is not perceptible to us. So I can decisively say that this Mount Meru does not exist on this earth. So I'm not sure whether the descriptions of those 4 continents that are described in the Abhidhamma text can be actually taken as facts or not. The Bhagwan said, Subhuti, what do you think about this? If there was also just as many Ganges rivers as there are the grains of sand of river Ganges, would that grains of sand be many? Subhuti replied, said Bhagwan, if those very Ganges river were many, there is no need to mention the grains of sand. Bhagwan said, Subhuti, you should appreciate, you should understand. So whatever the case, whether this it's talking about Sumeru or whatever. And here we are talking about the sands or the grains of sands of Ganges. And these have to be, whether there are many or not, has to be posited in relation to something else. And so there's everything has to be posited in relation to something else. Without that, apart from that, you cannot talk about many or big or small and tall and so forth. Bhagavan said, Subhuti, you should appreciate, you should understand. If some men or women completely filling with the 7 kinds of precious things, then that many world systems, as there are grains of sand of river Ganges, were to offer to the Tathagata Arhat perfectly complete Buddha, Subhuti, what do you think about this? Would that man or women produce much merit on that basis? Subhuti replied, Bhagavan, much. Bhagavan, Sugata, much. That man or woman would produce much merit on that basis. And so in conventional terms, we can talk about good, bad, virtuous and non-virtuous, and so forth. So should be compared to someone who completely filling that many world systems with the 7 types of precious things were to give gifts to the Tathagata Arhat perfectly complete Buddha. If someone having taken even as little as a stanza of 4 lines from this discourse of Dharma were to explain it and correctly and thoroughly teach it also to others, on that basis the merit that itself would produce would be much greater, incalculable, unfathomable. Furthermore, Subhuti, if at whatever place on earth, even a stanza of 4 lines from this discourse on Dharma is recited or taught, that place on earth is the real shrine of the world with devas, humans, Asuras. What need to mention that whoever takes up this discourse of Dharma, memorizes, reads, understands, and properly takes to mind, will be most astonishing at that place on earth. So it is. This is similar to what is mentioned in the sutras, that the bodhisattva on the path of meditation, wherever they reside, that place becomes a shrine. At that place, the earth, where where the teacher resides, other levels of gurus also abide. He has said, and the Venerable Subhuti replied to the Bhagavan, well, it's the same name of this discourse of Dharma. How should it be remembered? He said that, and the Bhagavan replied to the Venerable Subhuti, the name of this Dharma discourse is the wisdom gone beyond. And so these discourses or teaches that of emptiness, and which is the ultimate nature of things. So when we talk about this and that thing, we do so in conventional terms. Whereas if you really were to search for the identity of these things in themselves, you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being this or that. It should be remembered like that. Why is that, Subhuti? Because the very same wisdom gone beyond that is taught by the Tathagata is not gone beyond. Therefore, it is called wisdom gone beyond. Subhuti, what do you think about this? Does the Dharma that is taught by the Tathagata exist whatsoever? Subhuti replied, Bhagavan, the Dharma that is taught by the Tathagata does not exist whatsoever. The Bhagavan said, Subhuti, what do you think about this? Are the quantities of particles of earth that exist in a billion-fold world system many? Subhuti replied, Bhagavan, the particles of earth are many. Sugata, there are many. Why is that, Bhagavan? Because that which is a particle of earth was taught by the Tathagata as not being a particle. Therefore, it is particle of earth. That which is a world system was taught by the Tathagata as being a world system. Therefore, it is called a world system. The Bhagavan Subhuti. What do you think about this? Is one to be viewed as the Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, due to those 32 marks of a great being? So we do talk about the 32 major marks and 80 minor marks and so forth. Subhuti replied, Bhagavan, it is not so. Why is that, Bhagavan? Because those 32 marks of a great being that are taught by the Tathagata are taught by the Tathagata as no marks. Therefore, they are called 32 marks of the Tathagata. The Bhagavan said, the Subhuti, compared to some men and women completely giving up bodies numbering the grains of sand of river Ganges. So by using your wisdom, when you're having done critical analysis into the nature of things, when you find the Buddha to be truly omniscient, having an unsurpassed wisdom, So with the text goes through the words of faith, and so that is where His Holiness comments. So thereupon, on page 111, thereupon the Venerable Subhuti, due to the impact of Dharma, shed tears. So His Holiness is making a comment on this. And having wiped away the tears, he was so moved by this teaching of emptiness, which gives rise to that of omniscient state. And he replied to the Bhagwan, this discourse on the Dharma taught thus by the Tathagata Bhagwan is astonishing. Sugata, it is astonishing. Bhagwan, since my production of exalted wisdom, I have never before heard this discourse of Dharma, Bhagwan. Those sentient beings who will produce correct discrimination about this sutra being explained will be most astonishing. Why is that, Bhagwan? Because that which is correct discrimination is not discrimination. Therefore, correct discrimination was taught by the Tathagata as saying correct discrimination. Bhagwan, upon this Dharma discourse being explained that I imagine and appreciate it, is astonishing to me. Bhagwan, in the final time, in the final age, at the end of the 500, those sentient beings who take up this Dharma discourse, memorize, read, and understand it, will be most astonishing, and so forth. So we have met with the teaching of the Buddha. We have the opportunity to listen to the teaching and think about it, and so forth. And it's said that it's been over 2,500 years since the Buddha appeared on this earth. So nearly 3,000 years. Of course, there are different views about when the Buddha appeared or lived. According to Titu Rinpoche, maybe we could take what is considered popularly these days, which is about 2,600 years since the Buddha appeared. So there are mentions of the different chapters of the teaching of the Buddha. And so it is said that at the end there will also be a chapter of merely upholding the signs. So we are at a time when people are more or less kind of attracted towards the materialistic way of life, but still we have many people, such as scientists and so forth, who are taking interest in the teaching of the Buddha. And some of them even say that Buddhism is scientific religion, and some even say that Buddhism is not a religion in the sense of the English word, but strictly, but it is a science of mind. So quantum physics is something that is amazing, and so these teachings also touch on the essential points of the quantum physics as well. So the Buddha are able to see both the truths, reality, the ultimate, and while being absorbed in meditation on the ultimate nature of things, they also see the varieties of things simultaneously. So to reach that kind of goal, in the highest Yoga Tantra, there is the mention of the clear light nature of the mind. So after having seized those of the three visions called the near whitish appearance, in reddish increase, and so forth, and when you are able to use that clear light nature and mind to realize emptiness and bring that wisdom up into yourself and develop it, then it's very powerful. So Islam was making comments on this paragraph, I think, in 111, page 111. He said that the Bhagavan replied to the Venerable Subhuti and so forth. And now we are in the next paragraph, further Subhuti, that itself, which is the patience gone beyond of the Tathagata, has not gone beyond. Why is that, Subhuti? Because when the king of Kali Yuga cut off my limbs and appendages, at that time there did not arise in my discrimination, in me, discrimination as a self, discrimination as a sentient being, discrimination as a living being, nor discrimination as a person, and in me there was no discrimination whatsoever, yet there was also no non-discrimination. Why is that, Subhuti? Because if at that time there had arisen in me the discrimination as a self, at that time there would also have been arisen discrimination of malice. If that had been arisen, discrimination as a sentient being, if there had been arisen discrimination as a sentient being, discrimination living being, discrimination as a person, at that time there would also have been arisen discrimination of malice. Subhuti, I know which clairvoyance that with clairvoyance that in the past periods, during my 500 lifetimes, I was a rishi called preacher of patience. So I'll take my tea for a minute. Just imagine you also are having this tea. So in Tibet, once there was a Lama giving teaching, during which he was saying that imagine that you are receiving this initiation, and one of the nomads was, one of the persons in the audience was a nomad. And so he found that what the Lama was actually saying was impractical, and he took out a butter from his pocket and said, Lama, please imagine that I have offered this to you, this butter to you, and put it back in his pocket.
Thank you.
Subhuti, for the Bodhisattva master, completely abandoning all discrimination, should generate the mind. For the unsurpassed perfect, complete enlightenment, one should generate the mind, not abiding in form. One should generate the mind, not abiding in sound, smell, taste, tactility, and phenomena. One should generate the mind, not abiding in non-phenomena either. One should generate the mind, not abiding in anything whatever. Why is that? Because that itself, which is abiding, does not abide. Therefore, the Tathagata taught the Bodhisattva should give gifts, not abiding. Further, Subhuti, the Bodhisattva should thus totally give away gifts for the welfare of sentient beings. However, that itself, which is discrimination as a sentient being, is non-discrimination. Therefore, those themselves who were taught by the Tathagata saying all sentient beings also do not exist. Why is that? Subhuti, because the Tathagata teaches reality, teaches truth, teaches what is. The Tathagata teaches what is without error. So further, Subhuti, the Dharma that is manifestly and completely realized or shown by the Tathagata has neither truth nor falsity. Subhuti, it is like this. For example, if a man with eyes has entered darkness, he does not see anything whatever. Likewise, should one view the Bodhisattva who totally gives up a gift by falling into anything, Subhuti, it is like this. For example, upon dawn and the sun rising, a man with eyes sees various kinds of forms. Likewise, should one view the Bodhisattva who totally gives up a gift by not falling into anything. Furthermore, Subhuti, those sons of lineage or daughter of the lineage who take up this Dharma discourse, memorize, read, understand correctly, and thoroughly teach it to others in detail, are taught, are known by the Tathagata, they are seen by the Tathagata, all those sentient beings will produce an unfathomable heap of merit. Furthermore, Subhuti, compared to some men or women at the time of dawn, totally giving up bodies numbering the grains of sand of river Ganges, also totally giving up bodies numbering the grains of sand of river Ganges at the time of the midday and evenings, in such number, totally giving up bodies for hundreds of 10 million, 100 billion eons, if someone having heard this Dharma and so forth. So, however much merit you may have accumulated, until you have not developed this wisdom of selflessness, you cannot actually move this mountain of self-grasping attitude, or the grasping at some true existence. And therefore, we need to develop, for nirvana, you need to develop that of the three trainings, and of which the training of wisdom is the most important. And even to reach Buddhahood, the omniscient state, from the Sutrayana point of view, you need to, in order to reach the two bodies of a Buddha, which are the Rupakaya and Dharmakaya, you need to have the wisdom of emptiness coupled with the merits, which are accrued through that of the bodhicitta and so forth. And in the Tantrayana, the subjective mind that is used to realize emptiness becomes subtler and subtler. So, whether you are cultivating a path for liberation or omniscience, you need to have the insight into emptiness. And therefore, the Buddha has taught this emptiness with great care. So thoroughly teaches to others in detail. Further, Subhuti, this Dharma discourse is unimaginable and incomparable. On page 113, this Dharma discourse was taught by the Tathagata for the benefit of sentient beings who have correctly entered into the supreme vehicle, the welfare of sentient beings who have correctly entered into the best vehicle. Those who take up this Dharma discourse, memorize, read, understand it correctly, and thoroughly teach it to others in detail, are known by the Tathagata. They are seen by the Tathagata. All those sentient beings will be endowed with an unfathomable heap of merit. So the sutra says it's not by those who perceive self, who have the view of a self, by those viewing a self, by those viewing a sentient being, by those viewing a living being, and so forth. Further, Subhuti, at whatever place on earth this sutra is taught, that place on earth will become worthy to be paid homage by the world with devas, humans, and asuras. The place on earth will become worthy as an object of prostration and work, worthy as an object of circumambulation. That place on earth will become like a shrine. Subhuti, whatever son of lineage or daughter of the lineage takes up the words of the sutra like this, memorizes, reads, understands, they will be tormented, will be intensely tormented. Why is that, Subhuti? Because whatever non-virtuous actions of former lifetimes that were committed by those sentient beings that would bring rebirth in the lower realms due to torment in this very life, those non-virtuous actions of former lifetimes will be purified and they will also attain the enlightenment of a Buddha. Subhuti, I know with clairvoyance that in the past period, in even more countless eons, much beyond, even beyond the Tathagata had completed the Buddha. The Vankara, there were 84,000 of 10 million, 100 million Buddhas, whom I pleased, and having pleased did not upset. Subhuti, from whatever I did, having pleased and not having upset those Buddha Bhagwans, and in the future period, at the end of the 500, from someone taking up this sutra, memorizing, reading, and understanding, Subhuti, compared to this heap of merit, the former heap of merit does not approach. Even 100th part, 1,000th part, 1,000th part, 100,000th part does not withstand enumeration, measure, calculation, similarity, equivalence, or comparison. Subhuti, at that time, the son of lineage or daughter of the lineage will receive a quantity of heap of merit that, if I were to express the heap of the merit of those sons of lineage or daughters of lineage, that the sentient beings would go mad, would be disturbed. And so, this shows how much merit one gains by engaging in this teaching. Furthermore, Subhuti, this Dharma discourse being unimaginable, its maturation indeed should also be known as unimaginable. Then the Venerable Subhuti replied to the Bhagwan, Bhagwan, how should one who has correctly entered, and so forth. So with regard to nirvana, there are those of the nirvana called with remenders and without remenders, with regard to which, of course, there are different interpretations when we study Madhyamaka texts, treatises, and those of the Prajnaparamita studies. So Bhagwan Subhuti here, Bhagwan said, Subhuti here, one who has correctly entered the Bodhisattva's vehicle should generate the mind thinking this: I shall cause all sentient beings to pass completely beyond sorrow in the realm of nirvana without remainder of the aggregates. Although sentient beings were caused to pass completely beyond sorrow like that, no sentient being whatsoever was caused to pass beyond sorrow. Why is that, Subhuti? Because if a bodhisattva engages in discriminating a sentient being, he is not to be called a bodhisattva. Also, if he engages in discriminating a person, he is not called to be called a bodhisattva. Why is that, Subhuti? Because the Dharma called one who has correctly entered the bodhisattva vehicle does not exist whatsoever. Subhuti, what do you think about this? Does that Dharma that was so manifestly and completely realized by the Tathagata from the Tathagata, the Vankara, unsurpassed, perfect and complete enlightenment, exist whatsoever? He said that, and the Venerable Subhuti replied to Bhagwan, the Dharma that was manifestly and completely realized by the Tathagata from the Tathagata, the Vankara, unsurpassed, perfect and complete enlightenment, does not exist whatsoever. He said that, and the Bhagwan replied to the Venerable Subhuti, So, Buddhi, it is so that the Dharma that was manifested and completely realized by the Tathagata, from the Tathagata, the Pankara, unsurpassed, perfect and complete enlightenment does not exist whatsoever. So, Buddhi, if that Dharma that was manifestly and completely realized by the Tathagata were to exist at all, the Tathagata, the Pankara, would not have. So there's no truth and no falsity. It refers to getting rid of the two extremes. So in the Heart Sutra, we come across the fourfold emptiness, where it says form is empty, emptiness is form, and form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness too is not other than form. So these four phrases say that takes the form as the basis for emptiness. So because form is something that we can see, it comes from causes and conditions. And because it comes through causes and conditions, it is dependent on others. Whereas the form, if you actually break it down into its parts, nothing can be pointed to as that form. And so it is similar to what the quantum physicists also say. And so when you search for the form itself within it, nothing can be found. Therefore, form is empty. And so in quantum physics, they say that nothing objectively exists, and therefore it's almost like the rejecting the externality of things. Whereas the Madhyamakas say that there's nothing objectively existing when you search for the identity of things. And therefore, although things do not have any identity when you search for them, for the designated objects, it does not exist ultimately, and whereas it does exist in relative sense, and therefore emptiness is form. These two, the form and its emptiness, are not separate. One is conventional level, and the other one is when you actually check its ultimate nature. And therefore, form is empty, emptiness is form, and emptiness is not other than form, and form too is not other than emptiness. So because of form, so when we talk about emptiness, it is not a nihilistic view where it is said that nothing exists, the form does not exist and so forth, but because the form exists by way of designation, merely by way of designation, it does not have an independent existence, therefore it is empty. Similarly, with the mind itself, you cannot find it. When you, of course, leave it without doing any kind of analysis into it, of course the mind exists, form exists, and so forth. Both the object and the subjective mind exist in conventional terms. So in the offering of a talk in Chonang tradition, there is this verse which says, so this illusory appearance is there in the things, and the mind has no concrete existence. So we could use this verse of from the Jonang tradition in understanding both conventional reality and the ultimate reality. So a body that becomes from a small, when it turns into a big body, it shows that it has no independent inherent existence. So his Lord was commenting on this sentence on page 115. Therefore, it is said that the old dharmas are Buddha's dharmas. So Buddhi, it is like this. For example, like a human endowed with the body, and the body became large. The Venerable Subhuti replied to Bhagwan, that taught by the Tathagata, a human endowed with the body and a large body is taught by the Tathagata as not being a body. Therefore, endowed with a body and a large body is said. So the Bhagwan, Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, it is so that the Tathagata possesses the divine eye and so forth. These actually mentioned the 5 clairvoyances. The 6 clairvoyances and the 5 divine eyes do exist conventionally, but the way they appear, if you actually, as they appear, if you actually look for the identity in themselves, nothing can be found as being divine eyes or the clairvoyances. So the Bhagwan said, Subhuti, what do you think about this? If there being also just as many as Ganges rivers, as there are grains of sand in the river Ganges, there were just as many world systems as there are grains of sand of those. Would those world systems be many? Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, it is so. Those world systems would be many. So with regard to the consciousness, of course, it does not have any spatial kind of extension, but we can talk about the mind in terms of its continuity in the 3 times. And so the past and future have already gone, and even in the present, half would be gone and half would be yet to come. And so there's nothing that can be pinpointed as being the present moment of mind as well. And so on page 116, it says that Bhagwan said, Subhuti, as many sentient beings as exist in those world systems, I totally know that they are continuum of consciousness of different thoughts. Why is that, Subhuti? Because a so-called continuum of consciousness is that taught by the Tathagata as a continuum, non-continuum. Therefore, it is called non-continuum of consciousness. Why is that, Subhuti? Because past consciousness does not exist as an observable, nor does future consciousness exist as an observable, nor does present consciousness exist as an observable. Subhuti, what do you think about this? If someone completely filling this billion-fold world system with the 7 types of precious things were to give gifts, do you think that son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage would produce an enormous heap of merit on that basis? Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, enormous, Sukada, enormous. The Bhagwan said, Subhuti, it is so that son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage would produce an enormous heap of merit on that basis. Subhuti, if a heap of merit were a heap of merit, the Tathagata would not have taught a heap of merit, called a heap of merit. Subhuti, what do you think about this? Should one be viewed as the Tathagata due to total achievement of form body? Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, it is not so. One should not be viewed as a Tathagata due to the total achievement of the form body. Why is that? Because, Bhagwan, because total achievement of the form body is that taught by the Tathagata as not being total achievement. Therefore, it is called total achievement of the form body. The Bhagwan says, Subhuti, what do you think about this? Is one to be viewed as a Tathagata due to perfect marks? Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, it is not so. One is not to be viewed as a Tathagata due to perfect marks. Why is that? Because that which was taught by the Tathagata as perfect marks was taught by the Tathagata as not being perfect marks before. They are called perfect marks. The Bhagwan says, Subhuti, what do you think about this? If it is taught that the Tathagata considers that the Dharma is demonstrated by me, Subhuti, do you view it like that? Because the Dharma that is demonstrated by the Tathagata does not exist whatsoever. Subhuti, if someone were to say that Dharma is demonstrated by the Tathagata, Subhuti, he would deprecate me since non-existent and wrongly seized. Why is that, Subhuti? Because that demonstrated Dharma, called demonstrated Dharma, which is referred to saying demonstrated Dharma does not exist whatsoever. Then the Venerable Subhuti said to the Bhagwan, Bhagwan, in the future, will there be any sentient being who, having heard this demonstration of such a Dharma as this, will clearly believe? The Bhagwan said, Subhuti, they are not sentient beings, nor non-sentient beings. Why is that, Subhuti, so-called sentient beings? Because they were taught by the Tathagata as non-sentient beings. They are called sentient beings. Subhuti, what do you think about this? Does the Dharma that was manifested and completely realized by the Tathagata and surpassed perfect and complete enlightenment does exist whatsoever? The Venerable Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, that Dharma that was manifestly and completely realized by the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment does not exist. So the Savatantrika Madhyamakas say that things do not exist the way they appear. So they say the things do exist the way they appear to us. And therefore we do not analyze into that aspect of the things or phenomena. So when you posit something being existent, even after doing some analysis into its identity, and then say this is it and point at that thing, I mean, that is actually called accepting things even after ultimate analysis. So in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental wisdom verses of the root wisdom verses of the middle way, Master Nagarjuna decisively says What arises through dependence is said to be empty, and that is itself said to be designated, and that is the middle way. And he says, since there is nothing which is not dependent, therefore there is nothing which is not empty. And so we need to study the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, chapters 18, 24, 26, and also chapter 22, for understanding the selflessness, or that things are merely existent by way of designation. So you need to put effort and continuously and persistently do meditation and critical analysis into the nature of things in order to really understand what is meant by mere designation and that things have no inherent existence. By studying Nagarjuna's text thoroughly, so on 118 it says further, Subhuti, compared to any son of the lineage, daughter of the lineage, collecting a heap of 7 types of precious things about equaling whatever Sumeru, king of mountains, exist in billions and so forth. And Subhuti, what do you think about this? If it is thought that the Tathagata considers sentient beings as liberated by me, Subhuti, do you view it like that? Why is that? Because Subhuti, because those sentient beings who are liberated by the Tathagata does not exist whatsoever. Subhuti, so here what is being said is that those sentient beings to be liberated and those who are liberated from the samsaric existence, and then the progression along the path do not have any inherent existence whatever. And then with regards to the Tathagatas themselves, or Sugatas themselves, there's nothing whatever we can actually pinpoint as being the Tathagata when we actually search for the identity of Tathagatas. So So it says on page 118, at the end of that text, whoever sees me as a form, whoever sees me as sound, has wrongly engaged by abandoning. Those beings do not see me. The Buddhas are dharmata viewed. The guides are the dharmakaya. Since dharmata is not to be known, it is unable to be known. So Subhuti, what do you think about this? If one grasps that the Tathagata Arhat, perfectly and complete Buddha, is due to perfect marks, Subhuti, you should not view so. For Subhuti, the Tathagata Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, does not manifestly and completely realize and surpass perfect complete Buddha due to perfect marks. So on 118 it says that Bhagavan said Subhuti, acquire, not wrongly grasp, therefore it is called acquire. So this indicates those are the two truths. Subhuti, if someone says that Tathagata goes or comes or stands or sits or lies down, he does not understand the meaning of it explained by me. Why is that, Subhuti? Because the Tathagata, the one going to does not go anywhere, nor has come from anywhere. Therefore, one says that Tathagata Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha. Further, Subhuti, if some son of lineage or daughter of lineage were to render as many atoms of earth as exist in a billionfold world system, like this, for example, into powder, like a collection of subtlest atoms, Subhuti, what do you think about this? Would that collection of subtlest atoms be many? Subhuti replied, Bhagwan, it is so. That collection of subtlest atoms would would be many. Why is that, Bhagwan? Because if there were a collection of the Bhagwan would not have said collection of subtlest atoms. Why is that? Because that collection of subtlest atoms that was taught by the Tathagata was taught by the Tathagata as no collection. Therefore, one says collection of subtlest atoms. That billionfold world system that was taught by the Tathagata was taught by the Tathagata as no system. Therefore, one says billionfold world system. Why is that, Bhagwan? Because if there were to be world systems, that itself would be grasping a solid thing. So the Bhagwan said, Subhuti, those who have correctly entered the Bodhisattva's vehicle should know, should view, should appreciate all dharmas like this. They should appreciate it like this, not abiding whatsoever in any discrimination as a dharma. Why is that? Subhuti, because discrimination as a dharma, called discrimination as a dharma, is taught by the Tathagata as non-discrimination. Therefore, one says discrimination as a dharma. Further, Subhuti, compared to any Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, who completely filling unfathomable, incalculable world systems with the 7 kinds of precious things were to give gifts, if any son of lineage or daughter of lineage who, having taken as little as a stanza or 4 lines from this perfect wisdom, were to memorize or read or understand it correctly and thoroughly teach it to others in detail, on that basis the merit he himself would produce would be more incalculable, unfathomable. So this verse that is on 121 as star, a visual aberration, a lamp, and so forth, could be explained in terms of teaching impermanence or selflessness. So the exalted Mahayana Sutra of Wisdom Going Beyond, called the Vajrakata, is concluded. So there may be people who read this sutra on a daily basis, and if you could actually get the meaning of this teaching based on your study of Mula Madhyamaka Karika and other Madhyamaka texts, it would be very good, very beneficial to you. Let's turn to the other text. Page 98, verse number 30, I think 35 or 36. Among the teachers, verse number 37, the teacher of dependent origination, among wisdom, the knowledge of dependent origination, you who are most excellent, like the kings in the world, know this perfectly well, not others. So the Buddha is someone who is an unsurpassable teacher because things do not exist. He taught that things do not exist the way they appear to us. So you can make sense of this teaching. It also undermines our grasping or our improper rumination. So Kundalama Lama Rinpoche used to say that the verse that comes from Mula Madhyamaka Karika, where it says, this fabrication is ended by emptiness, which as an instrumental case, it refers to that of the true path, and that if you interpret, read it in Sanskrit as this fabrication dissolves within emptiness, it is this cessation that you gain or attain through the true path. So the 4 seals of Dharma, which is impermanence, suffering nature of samsara, and empty and self nature. So the Buddha himself became someone fully enlightened and having full knowledge of everything because of his cultivation of this insight into emptiness. And he found that the best means to help others and oneself is the twofold, bodhicitta and the view of emptiness. And so for eons, when the Buddhas checked what is the best means to help others, they found bodhicitta to be. And then they also teach that of emptiness, to lead sentient beings along the path to enlightenment. So verse number 38, all that you have taught proceeds by the way of dependent origination. That too is done for the sake of nirvana. You have no deeds that does not bring peace. So peace is here refers to having overcome or pacified all suffering and its origin, the gross as well as the subtle ones. So alas, your teaching is such in whosever ears it falls, they all attain peace. So who would not be honored to uphold your teaching? So with regard to the teaching of emptiness, of course, we have the Madhyamaka's school of thought explaining it, and particularly the Madhyamaka system of Master Nagarjuna as interpreted and explained by masters like Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita. So those Madhyamakas who say that there's nothing whatever, even in conventional terms, that things exist ultimately, that they have any objective independent existence. And when they say this, the realists object to them. And then, therefore, Master Nagarjuna gives response to them by saying, you have not understood the meaning of emptiness, the nature of emptiness, and the purpose of emptiness. So if you closely check their opposition, their criticisms, the realist criticisms, they actually, you will find that they have self-contradiction within their own thesis, that they are objecting to the Madhyamakas while maintaining that things have some essential existence. Whereas the Madhyamakas, who do not accept any, even in convention, that things have any objective existence, is really marvelous. It overcomes all opposing challenges. It frees all from contradiction between early and later paths. It grants fulfillment of being's two aims. For this system, my joy increases evermore. And so forth. The intensity of thoughts, that sorrow does not let go of my mind, just like the mind of a mother constantly goes after her dear child. Here too I reflect on those words, I think, blazing with the glory of noble marks, and hallowed in a net of light rays, this teacher, and so forth. And so the Buddha taught selflessness, but amongst his followers, because of their difference in their intelligence, some are of sharper faculty and some are of duller faculty. So therefore, there are those followers who say that if you take these Prajnaparamita teachings literally, then there are those of logical fallacies, and therefore they interpret it by saying that by having these three things in mind, the Buddha taught that there's nothing whatever that exists ultimately in the Panchaparamita Sutras. So in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught taking for granted what is said to be things having some kind of a defining existence and so forth, defining characteristics and so forth. Whereas the 17 Nalanda masters follow different philosophical systems. Although they follow the same teaching of the Buddha, the teaching of selflessness. So to be blunt, I may say that the Buddha gave so many different varieties of philosophical ideas according to the dispositions of his disciples, and therefore he says seems to be saying that now it's your job to differentiate between what are literal and what are not literal teachings and so forth. And therefore he says, "O monks and scholars, just as gold is tested and so forth." So even amongst the same followers of the same teacher, the Buddha, the Vaibhashikas and Sautantikas only assert selflessness of persons, a gross form of it, and not selflessness of phenomena, whereas Chittamantras do assert the selflessness of phenomena on top of selflessness of persons, but they talk about non-dual selflessness or emptiness. And then there are different sub-schools within the Chittamantras. And then Madhyamakas, even amongst the Madhyamakas, there are different philosophical assertions. Master Bhavaviveka, who wrote the Blades of Reasoning and so forth, was a great master, of course, but he's still asserted that a person or a being must be found from amongst the aggregates, and therefore he says the consciousness is the person. So this excellent system, most marvelous, some individuals who are not so learned have entangled it in utter confusion, just like tangled Bhavazar grass. Seeing this situation, I strove with a multitude of efforts to follow after the learned ones, as sought your intention again and again. At such a time, I studied the numerous works of both our own and others' schools. So, own means middle way, and other school refers to the Chittamantras. My mind became tormented ever more constantly by a network of doubts. And so, having studied these Madhyamaka texts from the different sources of Madhyamaka texts, the Tsongkhapa himself says that this night lily, when he found this doubts about the teaching of selflessness, ultimately, then he says the night lily grove of Nagarjuna's treatises, Nagarjuna, whom you prophesied would unravel your unexcelled vehicle as it is, shunning extremes of existence and non-existence, illuminated by the garland of white light. So Master Nagarjuna very precisely differentiates between what is the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism or permanence. So although Master Nagarjuna wrote these excellent texts, but amongst his commentators, the ones who commented it without error and thoroughly, with a view that nothing whatever has any objective existence, independent objective existence, and souls illuminated by the garland of white light of Chandra's well-uttered insights. Chandra, whose stainless wisdom orb is full, who glides freely across scripture's space and so forth. And so Master Tsongkhapa gained very profound understanding of the Madhyamaka view due to his having received teachings from Master Rendawa. And so at that time, during the time of Rendawa, it is even said that I read a commentary on Bodhisattva Charyavatara by a Kamba master, and in which it is said that Je Rinpoche was inspired to take a special interest in Madhyamaka view because of being inspired by the Master Rendawa. And it is said that during Rendawa's time, this Kamba Lama says, God, whatever you do, walking or sitting or lying and so forth, I mean, you think only of Madhyamaka and talk of Madhyamaka. So who dispels the darkness of extremist hearts and outshines the constellation of the false speakers. When through my teacher's kindness I saw this, my mind found at rest at last. Of all your deeds, your speech is supreme. Within that too, it is this very speech. So the wise should remember the Buddha through this teaching of dependent origination. Following such a teacher and having become a renunciant, having studied the conqueror's words not too poorly, this monk who strives in the yogic practices, such as the depth of his reverence to the great seer. So this text is read. So this hymn entitled Essence of Well-Uttered Insights, praising the unexcelled teacher, the great friend to the entire world, even to the unfamiliar, for teaching the profound dependent origination, was composed by the well-read monk Lobsang Tagwepel. It was written at the heavenly retreat of Lhading on the towering mountain of Odegungil, otherwise known as Gaden Nambar Gyalweling. The scribe was Namkapel. So I have given an explanatory transmission of this text in praise of teaching Buddha dependent origination. I received it from the Kinori master Gen Rinzin Temba, who has received it from Kansar Dojishang. So it was a rare transmission that he passed on to me in the central part of Tibet. So since this text is short in praise for dependent arising, you could, if you could memorize it and then recite it, it would be good. So the title itself says that the Buddha taught dependent origination. Right in the beginning of the text, it says, I bowed to you, O conqueror, you who saw dependent origination and taught it. And so when you use the reasoning of dependent origination, I mean, you can do away with both the extremes of nihilism and permanence or eternalism. Whereas other reasonings to prove emptiness, I mean, could still lead you to go hold on to one of the extremes. So I'm not sure if I could visit often in this region. So since I'm already here this time once more, I thought of doing the Avalokiteshvara initiation during the preliminary and the actual initiation in one go. And then, as I said before, I will teach. I'll also give the Jenang permission of the white Manjushri. So since both of these come under the Kriya Tantra, you should stick to vegetarianism, vegetarian food, and you cannot eat fish or egg. So if you come here tomorrow morning and after eating eggs or fish and so forth, then when you wherever you are sitting, you could actually throw it up into the laps of your person next to you. So since you are traditionally followers of the teaching of the Buddha, I feel quite comfortable giving teaching to you. Otherwise, in countries which are not traditionally Buddhist countries, I feel a little hesitant, uncomfortable to give Buddhist teaching. So this is what happens to me in countries or places where traditional religion is not Buddhism, but the audience here is mostly those of traditional Buddhists. So you have come here with great enthusiasm. And so, see you tomorrow again. So just as the brave Manjushri summoned the Bhadra to realize things as they are, also I dedicate all these merits in the best way that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by the victorious ones, thus gone of the 3 times, so that I might perform the noble bodhisattva deeds.